either one of these any good?
Wow, this is a good movie.
It's pretty good.
Holiday season at the movies starting with a bang.
Sorry.
It's Glicked.
You waste
It's
our
Glicked
film.
weekend.
It's so bad.
This is where I hear, what's her name from Clueless saying, stop trying to make Glicked happen. It's not going to happen. But you know what we mean, Regina George. We'll start off with Elphaba, a misunderstood young woman because of her green skin, and Glinda, a popular girl, become friends at Shiz University in the land of Oz. After an encounter with the wonderful Wizard of Oz, their friendship reaches a crossroads. It is Wicked, Part 1.
I am Oz, the great and powerful.
Something bad is happening in Oz.
The best way to bring folks together is to give them a real good enemy.
Tell them how I'm defying gravity. You have no real power.
That's why I need you. Bring her to me.
This is so much bigger than us.
I'm not afraid. It's the wizard who should be afraid of me.
Yep, it is just part 1, and it's 2 hours and 40 minutes, part 1. So that's a big part 1. But we've kidded before, often on this podcast, about how I'm the musical fan.
Yes, I'm not.
You are not?
No.
There's a couple that you like, you have liked
Rocky
through the
Horror,
years.
yeah.
Rocky Horror, I think you like Sweeney Todd.
I do, yeah.
The darker stuff.
Yeah.
But even you came out of this pretty impressed.
And to be honest, I mean, to sort of go deeper, I read this book years ago. I don't like it. I think it's very clever. I absolutely do. I think the musical is clever. I don't like this musical. I don't like the stage show because as you know, I love the Wicked Witch of the West as a villain.
Right.
I love villains. Villains are always my favorite thing in any movie or any story. I love the villain. She is maybe the greatest villain in cinema history.
She's good.
And I don't want her to be the good guy.
I get that. And this one really kicked off the
neutering of all of our great villains. When then we got Maleficent, and then we got Cruella,
well,
and then we got
anything that becomes so popular, people are going to copy it.
Yes.
I get that, and by now that device has clearly jumped the shark.
I hate it. I hate that device.
This one, I think, this movie particularly reminds you of how it was pretty clever what they did back in, I think it was 95.
Yeah,
the
book came
Gregory
out,
Maguire novel, and then of course became the incredibly popular stage show. And now, after all these years, you get the movie Part 1. And it's directed by John M. Chu. And I remember a few years ago, about 3, I think, when I reviewed In the Heights. He directed that musical of Lin-Manuel Miranda. And at the time, he had been announced as doing Wicked. And he displayed enough of a flair for the musical numbers in that I said at the time in my review, hey, this bodes pretty well.
Yeah.
And it does. Because really, you look at his resume before In the Heights, and it was some crud.
Yes, Transformer.
G.I. Joe or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he did a really fine job within the Heights.
We did Crazy Rich Asians, which was a massive hit, and I think that is what propelled him.
Right, and then jump into the musical realm, and as we've said many times as well, just because you're a good director doesn't mean you can make the musical numbers pop.
No, and he does. He really does.
And boy, this one really does. And in case, I mean, if anybody isn't familiar with the story, as we just alluded to, it takes this great character, Wicked Witch of the West, and reimagines her as not a villain.
It's her origin story.
Her origin story and how she came to be referred to as the Wicked Witch of the West. And really that's where it leads us in part 1. I mean, it's her origin story as she is off to the Shiz University and she gets put in. She's really not supposed to be there.
No.
She's there with her sister, Nessa Rose, who's the favorite of the family. And she's not supposed to be a student, but she possesses some potential, and she flashes some potential of supernatural powers. So she catches the eye of Madame Morrible, played by the great Michelle Yeoh.
The great Michelle Yeoh.
Just as part of the spot-on casting in this movie that
Top
we'll get
to bottom.
Yeah. So then she is welcomed in to the school and put into a room with Galinda, played by Ariana Grande.
Yep.
And they are, of course, polar opposites.
Right.
And Elphaba is played by Cynthia Erivo.
Yeah.
So let's just start there with the casting, because the two of them, Erivo and Grande, are great.
And yeah, the first thing, of course, you have to do is get the voices, because the
Lord.
Broadway voices, iconic, brilliant.
Big songs.
Oh my God, these guys have great voices. They
do.
really sound
Tiny,
amazing.
little people.
I know, we were talking about that at lunch. They're both such small humans with such big voices.
My Lord. And apparently they sang live during production.
Which is nice, because I think that it comes across that way.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does. Their voices are incredible.
Yeah, they are.
They can
But-
handle these songs and more.
But they also really ground the characters.
They do.
I think that Grande gets sort of a little bit of an easier go, because she just has to be charming and vacuous
Yep.
in a way that is likable, which is a lot, but she does a lovely job
It is
of
a lot, because she is incredibly vacuous and vain and self-absorbed, but it comes off somehow as charming
Yep.
and humorous
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, very
there's
funny.
some
She's
humor
very
in
funny,
it.
yeah.
But then Cynthia Erivo has the longing and the baggage of being held down
Yep.
for so long. And let's face it, one of the themes for people that didn't read the book, and even if you've seen the stage show, in the book especially, the themes of racism
Yeah.
and really the threat of fascism,
Yes.
which comes into play with the wizard, are much more prevalent.
Yeah.
And I think this treatment, that's one of the reasons why it's so long, brings those to the forefront a little bit more than the usual stage production did.
In a really, I think, very solid way, in a way that grounds the narrative, gives it a bit of a backbone.
Yeah. The screenwriters that adapted are Winnie Holtzman and Dana Fox. And now early on, it's interesting, because I did like, say, the first hour, but it just, something to me, it seemed like it was holding back a little bit. A little bit stops and starts. There are some great moments in the first hour. There really are. But you have to you're introduced to the characters and everything, and get ready with the narrative and what's going on, if by chance you're not familiar. But then when Elphaba gets her invitation to visit the wizard in Emerald City, oh my Lord, once they make that trip to Emerald
Yeah.
City, you find out why they were holding back a little bit, because, man, after that hour mark, it pops.
It does.
The color's insane. The set design. And even, the CGI, when you're dealing with things like the flying monkeys and things, like pretty solid.
Yes, I think
Pretty
so too,
solid.
yeah.
Especially after we've just saw Red 1 last week. But yeah, man, the world building in the first hour is fine.
Yeah.
But boy, once it gets into that next setting, it is really, really great. And you've got another piece of the perfect casting, Jeff Goldblum as the wizard.
He is perfect. He is perfect.
so
He's
good.
so much fun. And for people who are already very big fans of the stage show, the two big songs of Act 1, Popular, and then Defy Gravity, they just do a magnificent job with both of them.
And also, there are a couple of other highlights as well. I thought The Wizard and I, Cynthia Erivo's big number early on, that really, she gets into those lyrics, and they really dig a little bit into the racism about her skin color.
Yeah.
And maybe she's dreaming of the fact that the wizard can change her skin color. Right. And so that brings that theme to bear early on. And then when they make the trip to meet the wizard, then you find out that she is just a part of his plan. And that's when the themes of gaslighting and abuse of power, themes that are sadly all too relevant again right now, come up to the forefront. And I think that this movie does a good job of reminding people, or people who weren't familiar with this material at all, what it's saying. And we haven't even talked about the talking animals, because there's a whole other part of this that, especially early on, before they make the trip to Emerald City, in the university setting, there's a growing threat to the talking animal population of Oz. And one of those talking animals is a very popular instructor at the school, voiced by Peter Dinklage.
Yep.
And so that's a political and social commentary going on under the surface that you can't ignore, and this movie version really brings it more to the front, I think.
Yeah, and there have been complaints about that, which is always dumb. It's just dumb to complain about something like that. But also, not only is it in the Wicked novel, it's all over Baum's series. The Wizard of Oz is part of course, a series of books that were written many, many, many years ago, and each one of them is quite political. So the original movie, The Wizard of Oz, the underpinnings are political, as is most art, certainly most great art. And I think that it's not just that it's relevant today. It just it gives the story more than just unpopular girl, popular girl anxiety.
Right. And I think that is where, as we just talked about a little bit before, when people wonder, why is it so long? I think that's what they expand.
Yeah.
They do expand some of the musical numbers a little bit, including the big one at the end, Defying Gravity, to make it the showstopper it deserves to be. But they expand these themes, and I think it does benefit the film. Early on, I was thinking, before I saw it, I thought, boy, it might have been better to just go for one 3.5 hour one, trim it down and just go for one. But I don't know now. I mean, it was yet to be seen how part 2 was going to be. But then when you get to the end, and everybody that is familiar with the show, at least a little bit, probably knows how it is going to end and how it is going to leave us. And it makes it it makes it worth waiting for. It really does.
Yeah, it does.
It's staged well.
It is.
We've talked about how the voices blend. And the characters blend, too. I mean, the actors, they have great chemistry.
They do. They really do.
They make a great pair. And I think everybody that has been waiting for this for so long is really going to be happy with it. I can't imagine a Wicked fan being let down. I can imagine people who are coming in cold, don't know what the fuss is about. Oh, it's not my cup of tea. All right, fine. But if you've been waiting for this, I think it's going to be a satisfying movie experience. And it's another case where you see how a move from stage to screen can be done. It's certainly been done and fell on its face. I'm thinking a chorus line. That sucked. That movie was awful. And I'm a big fan of the chorus line, but it had no life to it. No life. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It didn't take advantage of the space. This is a really good job of doing that. Same way I thought Spielberg did with West Side Story.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, these numbers, the musical sequences pop and move when they should, and then some of the more intimate, more personal songs, giving them the intimacy that they deserve, and just let these performers show what they can do. And man, they can do a lot. So I think this is really, really good. And the fact that you're not a fan of musicals and you liked it, I think that says a lot. I really do.
I enjoyed it very much.
Because it's very entertaining.
And I wanted very much not to have to go. That's, leading up to it, I thought, that, it would be unfair to the movie for me to go. Fans of the stage show, they don't need to hear my opinion on it. I wanted not to go, especially when I realized the length of it. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
There you go. It's all around. It's a really well done adaptation of Part 1. And we will look forward to Part 2. But Wicked Part 1 in the theaters now. Somehow I think it's going to do pretty well. Moving on to the second big one in theaters this weekend. After his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must look to his past to find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. Ridley Scott is back with Gladiator 2.
Whose head could I give you that would satisfy this fury?
The entire Roman armies.
Too much.
The general will do.
Rome must fall. I need to only give it a push.
Hands on the mausoleum floor. Blood stains the Colosseum doors.
This ring belonged to Maximus. Now I give it to you. What is the dream of Rome? That people are not free.
I was owned. Now I will control an empire.
I will not waste another generation of young men for their vanity.
Strength among us!
This is how Rome treats its heroes! The gods have spoken!
Well, this movie is just more evidence that even in his 80s now, I mean, Ridley Scott can stage an epic.
Yeah, he can.
He really can.
He absolutely can. And, it's been almost 25 years. It's been 24 years since Gladiator, one of his most beloved films. I mean, an Oscar winner.
Oh, yeah.
And he returns to the story. It's not 24 years hence in the actual narrative. It's about 14 years later. And things didn't go as Maximus had hoped when he laid down his life.
Right.
And now they don't explain how it happened, but there's a pair of twins who are currently the co-emperors of Rome, and they make Commodus look like he was a man of the people. These two, nothing but excess, and they're just nutty. And of course, nothing is going well in Rome because of it, and the people are starving, and the people are unhappy, but they're still sending their generals out to conquer more areas. And so Pedro Pascal plays the returning general. He's just conquered a country on the coast of Africa and has brought home a bunch of prisoners of war, among them Paul Mescal. And he's a good fighter. And so eventually what happens, he gets thrown into a ring with some giant, very toothy apes. and he comes out okay. And so Denzel Washington's character buys him and decides that he's going to fight him as a gladiator. So eventually, through some wheeling and dealing, Paul Mescal's character is in Rome, and they're in the big Colosseum, and he just keeps making himself out to look like a fighter that you can get behind. Meanwhile, Denzel Washington's character is sort of, wheeling and dealing and getting in good here and, recalling some debts there. And it's very sort of Shakespearean in the way that it sets these two kind of stories in motion simultaneously. And I'll tell you what, so Paul Mescal is great. He does a really, really good job. And where Russell Crowe was fierce, but he was very sort of stoic and noble, and there was this tenderness, whenever he would think about his family or whatever. Paul Mescal's full of rage and just this vulnerability, and it's similar and different, and the character, he seems like he's just going to fall apart at any moment, but at the same time, at no point do you think he's going to not kill his opponent. He's going to kill his opponent every time. So it's an interesting way to sort of change things up a little bit. But other than that, the pattern of the film, like beat by beat, it follows the original a little too closely. So it feels a little bit more just like a retread of the original film. And then there's also a couple of other kind of minor issues. The accent work is kind of all over the place. Paul Mescal in particular, because every once in a while, man, that kid's an Irishman, but not the whole time. And there are some moments of weak CGI. I mean, not terrible CGI. The ape fight, every so often, really kind of, but the sharks, which first of all was a dumb idea. But also, there's a part in the Colosseum where they're on ships. They stage this big ship fight, and then they put sharks in the water, which is a weird, very sort of James Bond thing to do anyway, but also they don't look good. And so that was a problem. And it is about 2.5 hours long as well, and kind of does feel it. But on the whole, I think that you're going to get past that, because most of, first of all, there are battle sequences, including the opening battle sequence, that are very, very impressive, like huge, massive, like he did with Napoleon. Just huge armies clashing with each other was very impressive.
And then also the last duel, which not enough people saw.
No, you're right.
But if you see this and like it, look up the last duel, because the sequences in that, the battle sequences in that are great.
Yeah, and then
that's a good movie.
It is a good movie, and the hand-to-hand combat, the stuff that happens inside the Colosseum, very good. The whole cast, really, really good, top to bottom, does a great job. The writing suffers a little bit, and the CGI suffers a little bit. So compared to the original, it just doesn't really compare to the original. But if you put that aside and you want a big spectacle, it looks gorgeous.
And it's a different sort of role and performance than we've seen from Denzel in a while. Just really having some saucy fun.
Oh, my God. He's so much fun. He's so much fun. And honestly, it's a very different role for Mescal, who has made his name in these sort of sensitive characters in indie films. For him to just come out and be just all buff and own the film, he does a really good job. The other thing, and I got to say, is that I don't want to give away much about the storyline, but the political underpinnings of this film are quite muddy in a way that they are simply not in the original film. And that made it, especially as Denzel Washington's character sort of evolves throughout the film, at the end, I'm like, my loyalties are split at this point. So I feel like, it's just not nearly as good a film as the original Gladiator, but it is absolutely worth seeing.
Yeah, two good, big holiday potential blockbusters out, and the second one is Gladiator 2 in theaters. Let's go to Disney Plus for a young tween drama. Melody Brooks is navigating 6th grade as a nonverbal wheelchair user who has cerebral palsy. With the help of some assistive technology and her devoted allies, Melody shows that what she has to say is more important than how she says it. It's called Out of My Mind.
What's this?
I met a talker.
How much is it?
$17,000. She wants to call her friends and gossip about boys.
Choose your voice.
You pick. It's your voice.
Hello.
Melody?
Daddy, how are you today?
You're so beautiful.
It just takes some time.
Whiz Kids tryouts are upon us.
Is that a talking computer? Make it say something. Connor, he's nice.
You like him. You want to kiss him.
I made Whiz Kids.
Of course, you're a fighter. You have a voice. Let them hear you.
Sometimes I need a push, but I won't be pushed around.
This is based on a very popular novel, and it stars a newcomer, a young actress named Phoebe Ray Taylor, who is nonverbal and who also uses a wheelchair. And she is playing Melody, who has, as the synopsis says there, cerebral palsy, and has spent all of her school years in a special education school and doing quite well. And all the counselors tell her parents that she's exceeding expectations. And so her dad says, well, why don't we raise the expectations then? So they arranged for her to start spending at least one day a week in a regular classroom. And that, of course, is going to bring a host of challenges, not only physical, but it's that age where there are social challenges, even for any child, but especially for Melody. And she gets the chance to prove herself because her family is able to get this, it's called a Medi-Talker, sort of like the machine that Stephen Hawking talked with, one of those. And then also she's able to try out for the Whiz Kid trivia team and show her smarts. And all this time we hear, even though she is nonverbal, even before she gets the device, the Medi-Talker device, we hear her thoughts thanks to her inner voice, and her inner voice is voiced by Jennifer Aniston. Because the movie is set in 2002, and Melody is a big fan of Friends, and she says, I can have anybody I want do my voice. I'm going to have Jennifer Aniston. So that's who we get. All right. And it navigates through this story that really is aimed, like the book was, at that 12, 13-year-old audience.
Yeah.
And for that, it's perfectly fine. I mean, you're going to get simplified issues in the story.
Yes.
Things are brought up, and then like when they're talking about her going to school, her mother, played by Rosemary DeWitt, always nice to see.
Yes.
Not exactly a big fan. She's worried, of course. How's it going to be? Well, who's going to help her go to the bathroom? You know what? That's a good question. It never really gets addressed. It sort of just gets dropped. And in the real world, that would be a big question. And also, her parents seem to be pretty well off. I mean, they are worried about the $17,000 this Medi-Talker is going to cost, but then they're able to navigate the insurance company a little too easily. So, and you never really see them working, but you get what I'm saying. Those things are kind of smoothed over because we're talking to a younger audience. We want to make it easier to understand, and I get that. And that's how this movie works best, as a sort of a conversation starter for family viewing, especially over the holidays, where you can make the young people and the families maybe talk about, first of all, understanding people with nonverbal disabilities, also empathy and compassion and acceptance and all those great things to talk about, and let these kids of this age see someone, their peers dealing with it.
Because I think, one of the things I think that makes this film so important is that it is really, I think, pervasive for people to assume that a person who is nonverbal isn't thinking clearly. That they don't understand what they're seeing. They don't understand what you say to them, that they're not thinking on, their age level, and that there's no reason to believe that that's true.
That's right. And they certainly bring that into the storytelling with the teacher. He thinks he's one of those guys who's being really understanding, and he's really not.
Yeah.
And so things will be learned today. Lessons will be learned, and part of that involves a big speech at the end, which is always, not the best device in a narrative. But again, this is aimed at certain age group of audience that I think it works better for. And we really got to say, the young actress, Phoebe Ray-Taylor, she's just as cute as she can be, and a charmer, and just really nails it with this part. So well done all the way around. And this is a good one for families. The director is Amber Seeley, and it's based on the novel by Sharon Draper, and Daniel Stiepelman adapts it. It's on Disney Plus now, and it's called Out of My Mind. Let's go to Prime Video next for a horror sequel with a familiar name. A group of homeless misfits must fight for survival when they discover a plot to exterminate every homeless person in the city. It's street trash.
Mayhem in the city. Homeless are fighting against the government. People are fighting for their rights.
What the fuck?
There's another one! Go! Go!
I present to you the crew, the most incredible crackheads that you'll ever meet.
I have reduced the number of homeless people in the city to basically zero.
The mayor's fucking melting people.
They're exterminating everybody. You are finally ready, my China. It's time.
We don't want this party turning into a massacre.
Massacre sounds good to me.
Fucking good, come here!
If you're familiar with the 1987 original film Street Trash, you might be thinking to yourself, why would anyone remake it? And so you might be happy to know that it's not being remade. It is a sequel, and it's set in present day-ish Cape Town, because the filmmaker, Ryan Kruger, is a South African filmmaker. And you might know him from Fried Berry, which is great.
That was a lot of fun.
It's a weird one.
Yeah.
And if you watch Fried Berry, you think, yes, I can see why somebody thinks this is the guy to remake Street Trash. I can completely understand that. And he does an absolutely solid job. There are a couple of things in Street Trash that are, just to be, forthright, too offensive to be remade in a film that's being made this day and age. And that those couple of things, they don't make it to the sequel. Neither does the toilet sequence, which is by far the most famous sequence in the original film. But the idea is still there. And in fact, the very product is still there. They have the Viper that they're turning into a mist that they're going to put inside drones and take out all of the homeless population, because rich people are tired of having to look at homeless people. And so it's got clearly a bit of a political underpinning. The film does. It's an underdog tale, and we spend our time with this ragtag group of homeless people, and the performances are not good to good. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's all over the place, but it's got the same kind of low rent charm.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as I think, visually ambitious as Fried Berry. Fried Berry had a very unique perspective, but it looks the way it ought to look to be a sequel to, which is to say, it's very goopy and brightly colored. There's a lot of melting that looks really like melting crayons, honestly.
Yeah, well, all you got to do, if you've seen the poster, it's just a colorful melting face.
Yes.
So that's what we're dealing with, yeah.
So, if you like the original, I'm not positive you'll like this, because it's not nearly as mean-spirited. It's a much goofier kind of a film, but it is, I think, a fitting reimagining, up-to-date kind of version of the original Street Trash. And I'm not here to recommend the original Street Trash. It is not a classic, but I saw it, of course. I don't mind it. I like it. I was eager to see what Kruger did with this, and I enjoyed this as well.
And in case, like us, you enjoyed Fried Berry, the actor from Fried Berry, Gary Green.
Yes, he's also Two-Bit.
In Two-Bit, is in this one as well. And that is Street Trash. It's on Prime Video. Let's stay with horror and go to Shudder. Rita, a 13-year-old girl, runs away from her abusive father to the big city. She finds solace until she's placed in a safe house run by the state. Rita and her cellmate plot an escape that ends in a shocking act of violence. It's called Rita.
Todas ellas creen que hay una profecía.
This is from filmmaker Jairo Bustamante, who made La Llorona a couple of years ago. So not the American version, but a Guatemalan version that was really, really wonderful. And this film, like La Llorona, he mines historical tragedies in Guatemala for a sort of fairy tale. This one very specifically a fairy tale, and tragically a much more recent piece of history than La Llorona. And it's told from the perspective of Rita, who's 13 years old. And so she sees what's happening to her in sort of the form of a fairy tale. And she's being taken to the state-run institution, a shelter, they call it, that she sees as being sort of the palace. But unfortunately for her, the palace is being run by ogres and witches. And inside the institution, the girls are separated by age range, and she sees them all they all wear, actually, uniforms to match their clique. And you have princesses and fairies. You have dogs, which are muzzled. There are bunnies. The bunnies are the pregnant girls, and she is an angel. And so and it's an interesting concept. So it's almost got kind of a Guillermo del Toro sense of sort of that macabre fairy tale quality, but it never leaves the very gritty reality of her situation. She sees it as a fairy tale, but we can see that it is not. And so in that way, it reminded me a little bit of Tigers Are Not Afraid. Issa Lopez's Tigers Not Afraid.
Yep.
And the performances, which are exclusively the girls in the film, non-actors, they've never been in anything else before, they all do an exceptional job. And one of the reasons that I think it's really great that they were non-actors to begin with is because it underscores the gritty reality, the authenticity of the story, which is kind of at odds with the supernatural component of the story. All of it works together really well. It is a really hard film to watch, especially when you realize that it is based on true events. And so you know that going in. It's a difficult film, but it's just, at the same time, quite an achievement.
And that is on Shudder, and it's called Rita. And we'll go back to Prime Video for an action thriller. After escaping a Russian labor camp, 3 men must overcome the treacherous wilderness and each other as their journey home turns into a brutal fight for survival. It's Whiteout.
We need to cover as much ground as we can. If we can get past the lake, go through the mountain, and find the train tracks, we all go home.
That could take months.
10 days, if all goes well. This is about survival.
I think it's safe to say we've officially escaped.
The wilderness is our prison now. The longer we're out here, the more dangerous it gets.
Henry! Hey, come on, Henry. We need to get a fire going.
If you don't get up, you will die.
Run! Run, Henry! How do you feel? Cold?
When you start praying, you stop trying.
Hide your fear.
Schlocketeer Daniel Baldwin reviewed this one for us. And, you know, what he says basically is that it's fine. You know, it's not reinventing the wheel, but if you like this sort of survival thriller fantasy fiction type, so not based on a true story, just the thriller that is based on the idea of survival, it's fine.
Yeah, you might, if you're searching, you might find this under its original title called Walking Supply, now called Whiteout. But yeah, exactly. If this is your bag, then Daniel says you'll find enough here to make it worth your while. It's called Whiteout, and it's on Prime Video. And one more on VOD this week, a horror drama following the loss of his father. A grieving 20-year-old struggles to hold his family together as an unspeakable darkness plagues his older brother in The Shade.
I think she's why he came home.
Help me! Help me! Help me!
saw her right.
Remember, if this thing you're seeing is only happening in your mind, it can't hurt you.
Adam Barney reviewed this one for us, and he was pretty impressed by it.
Yeah, grief is a very commonly used theme in horror, and we've seen some great movies. You know, just off the top of my head, The Babadook is one of the most recent ones, but it's really a common theme. Understandably so.
Right.
It's such a big emotion that can drive so many different thoughts and actions, and grief is certainly at the core of this movie. But you know, he didn't love it. Adam Barney didn't love it, but thought it was solid as well.
Yeah, he thought it was a little longer in particular than it needed to be, but he was sold on the creature.
Yes,
and that every time the creature is on the screen, you know, tensions rise, dread builds, and that was probably enough to make it worth watching.
Yeah, and that's important. If you got a creature, you got to get it right, because when you finally see it, you can just you know?
Yeah.
And so I can see how that can elevate something that maybe would have just been really mediocre without it. So gotta love that creature, and you can check out Adam's full review at madwolf.com for The Shade, which is on VOD now. Well, speaking of the Schlocketeer, he is off this week, so we'll check in next week for the latest studio news. And speaking of next week, got another big one coming. It's Moana 2 is out next week.
That's right, plus the new Luca Guadagnino, Queer.
One called The Quest.
Our Little Secret.
Angelina Jolie in the story of Maria Callas in Maria.
Nutcrackers, filmed right here in Central Ohio.
Yeah, that's with Ben Stiller. And one called Heavier Trip. So that is all next week, but this is a big week. Are you down with the Glicked? But even if you're not, what do you think about the movies? Wicked Part 1, Gladiator 2, even some of the smaller movies. We love to keep the conversation going. You can easily find us on the socials at Mad Wolf Columbus. We finally got around. We're on TikTok. We're ticking and talking. And we don't have that many followers right now, so please throw us a bone. we held off for so long, but we're just dipping our toe in to the TikTok. So Mad Wolf Columbus on there as well, and of course the main website is madwolf.com. So plenty of ways to keep in touch. We hope you will. Hope you're having a great start to your holiday season and enjoying these movies that are coming out now. Big time for movies, and let us know what you think. Until next week, be well. She is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf,
and this is the Screening Room Podcast.
Stop trying to make Glicked happen.
I won't.
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Bye.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.